All right, welcome to the second podcast of the Ohio Valley Sports Blog. I'm BJ Anderson.
I'm Cody Anderson.
I'm Ian.
All right, this week we're going to start out with some NFL talk and the slowly crumbling Steelers. Steelers took a 40-23 loss Sunday night at Heinz Field at the hands of the Bears. With the exception of some nice throws by Ben Roethlisberger, big night by Antonio Brown. It's just another rough week for the black and gold. So what do you look for this week?
Well, I'm looking for the continued development of that offensive line. You noticed last week that halfway through the game they started rotating Beachum for Gilbert, Beachum for Adams, and just mixing those three around. You know that's not a good sign when you're in the third week of the NFL season and you're rotating your line around like that. That's stuff you get done in preseason or in training camp.
Right. I mean, it comes back to the bad drafting of the offensive line. I mean, Adams was an absolute beast at Ohio State. He's been a bust so far. The same for Gilbert at Florida. Beachum has been a nice surprise. I mean, wherever he's filled in, he's done a pretty nice job. But you have to have two solid tackles, especially when you have a quarterback like Ben Roethlisberger. Also, on the defensive side of the line, they're not getting much pressure up the middle. They're really missing Casey Hampton. Steve McLennan has been a big disappointment so far this season after a pretty good season last year. The ends Keese was solid as always. Ziggy Hood rotating in has been okay this year, but I mean it starts up front and it hasn't been good so far.
It's just I don't understand where you guys find the problem in all of this. I kind of like it, but there's a lot of pressure on this team right now to try and figure out instantly what the problem is and fix it now. Listen, this is a problem that has been building for years and years and years. The age is finally starting to catch up with this defense a little bit. The like you said, the series of drafts where things just did not work out the way that the front office kind of planned it to, and now you're finally starting to see that play out on the field. No fault to Mike Tomlin or Todd Haley in this particular regard, although I do think that the way that Todd Haley is managing the offense right now does need a lot of work because for some reason those guys are not buying into the system. They haven't been buying into the system since he's came to the team. And that's going to be something that you can expect, I think, to see the Pittsburgh Steelers have years like this for maybe the next 2, 3, 4 years.
Well, I think the problem with Haley's offense is the most solid player on that offense right now is Ben Roethlisberger. He's the only one who makes plays. He has a solid pedigree, and they're taking the ball out of his hands with Haley's offense. Like the week 2 game against the Bengals, they open it up. 3 straight running plays. They don't even let Ben do what he does best. I think. What do you think about playing in London this week? Do you think that'll have any effects on them?
No, I think it'll be business as usual. Though I do think they might suffer from the time zone difference. Though it's a disadvantage for both teams, so I don't think they'll use that as an excuse. I just don't see why they play the game in London at all. I mean, I get it's all about money and they're trying to expand the game. But, I mean, we saw how NFL Europe panned out, so I don't see why we're even playing over there.
Right. What do you think about looking towards the future? Is it time to give up on this season? I mean, 0-3, only 10% of teams since 1990 have started 0-3 and made the playoffs. Do you think it's time to look forward to next season, start building for the future?
Like I said, I mean, I think you can expect to see the Pittsburgh Steelers kind of struggle like this for the next 2 or 3 or 4 years even, when you really have to start looking towards, all right, now is the time you have to build in the draft, you have to build in free agency, you have to find guys that are going to be high value, high payoff, and guys that you know are going to come in and perform. Now, if you want, I think the Steelers still have a little bit of a chance of salvaging the season. The AFC North is still a little weak. Baltimore is at the top. Cincinnati, although they did take it to Pittsburgh in their first meeting in week 2, I do think that Cincinnati is a very beatable team in this division. You still have Cleveland. You never know what you're going to get from Cleveland on a week-to-week basis. The AFC North, there are still some games that can be salvaged in there. The problem is how are you going to handle a lot of what these teams are throwing at you? Because now you have 3 weeks of film that shows what other teams have done to you to make you look bad. And now they're just going to expand on that. I think it's too early to call this season a wash. It's the 3rd week of the season. There's still a lot of football left to be played. We're not even a quarter of the way through the season yet. But the panic flags definitely need to be raised now.
Yeah, and when you talk about giving up on a season, I don't think Pittsburgh will give up on a season at all. I just don't think they're as good as the other teams that they're going to be playing. So whether they go out and tank on purpose or try to win a game, I still don't see us doing very well.
I don't believe that a team will ever intentionally tank games. I think the competitive fire is too much in these
Right.
guys to ever intentionally throw games. And I think you're going to see maximum effort from every single one of these guys every Sunday that they step out on the field. But you just have to come to expect now that, maybe the Steelers aren't going to be the team that they were a few years back when they were constantly playing in AFC title games, when they were constantly Super Bowl contenders, when they were constantly winning the AFC North. Those days are gone now. And now's the time to try and start getting those days back as soon as possible, because I've said this for a long time. Football is a lot better when the Pittsburgh Steelers are near the top, because it's one of the dynasties of this league, and it's something that a lot of the teams on the bottom tier of the league, their game's always raised when they're playing Pittsburgh, because they know what a win over the Steelers means. And I think if you want to get that back, it's time to start building in the draft, in free agency, in the offseason. You really got to start to improve this team in ways that the Steelers really haven't had to do in the last couple of years.
Okay, let's transition to another struggling AFC North team. The Browns are going into Paul Brown Stadium to take on the Bengals this week. Coming off a pretty surprising win. I mean, you trade away your franchise running back. You're starting your third-string quarterback. And after all this controversy, you go into Minnesota and you come away a winner. So what do you look for this week from Brian Hoyer?
Well, I mean, it is a home game this week. They are playing in Cleveland. It's not in Cincinnati. But the Browns showed a lot of life in the game against Minnesota. They showed a lot of things, and you can't undervalue the return of Josh Gordon to that offense. What that brought to that team gave them a legitimate deep threat down the field. Opened a lot more of the playbook up. It was able to run a couple jet sweeps around the end. It was able to kind of chuck the ball downfield a little bit. And Brian Hoyer is a lot different quarterback than Brandon Weeden. Brian Hoyer is actually a lot more mobile of a quarterback. He's able to get out of trouble in the pocket. His footwork's a lot better. I mean, the guy spent time behind Tom Brady. I mean, you learn the importance of the little things in quarterbacking from a guy like that. So Brian Hoyer, I expect to see him have a pretty similar performance. I mean, obviously, I don't expect him to go out and throw for 300 yards like he did against Minnesota, but I think the Browns are able to really capitalize on this. I mean, it is a double game week this week. They play Sunday, and then they have a Thursday night home game against Buffalo. So you have a Sunday and a Thursday night game, but then you have the 10 days off. That gives you time to reevaluate where you are. Where do you want to go with the rest of the season? If you pick up one or two wins, even if you pick up both wins, can you imagine what that'll do for this team? I mean, we've spent all the last week talking about how this season was a wash and how they had completely given up and were ready to build for the draft. They pick up 2 wins this week. You're sitting there with a winning record, and you're near the top of the division. It would be – this week is absolutely critical for the Cleveland Browns for success down the rest of this season, maybe down the road.
But I was really impressed with them this week. I was really impressed with the coaching staff. I mean, after all the controversy swirling around the city, they went out there and they pulled out a lot of stops, a fake punt, trick plays, because they knew they had to win. And that's not something that Cleveland coaching staffs do. I mean, especially after that, everyone's saying they're tanking on the season. They got there and get a good win on the road. This week, I think probably the best matchup will be A.J. Green versus Joe Hayden. I mean, one of the top receivers in the game, one of the best cornerbacks in the game. It'll be similar to the matchup Ike Taylor versus A.J. Green. I think that Joe Hayden will shut him down, and it'll be up to
Mohamed Sanu.
Sanu and other guys to step up and really carry this offense for the Bengals. Because the Browns' defense has been effective this season. I mean, last week Adrian Peterson didn't have a top performance except for the first drive of the game, and they've done really well. And I think that they'll continue that this week against the Bengals.
Yeah, it was nice to see what the Cleveland Browns could do when they had an actual quarterback in this week. I mean, a lot of people were wondering why they didn't go to the backup Jason Campbell. But as you were saying, Hoyer learned under Tom Brady for a number of years in New England. And he also spent some of last year being Roethlisberger's backup. So he does have the experience. And it was nice. You're right. It was nice to see Josh Gordon back, but I liked what it did with Gordon returning, what it did for Cameron's game, because it took all the pressure away. Because everybody knows, okay, Josh Gordon suspended. What's Cleveland Browns' what's their main weapon of offense? You talk about Trent Richardson. Well, he's gone. So what's the main threat? It's Cameron. And when you brought Gordon back, you just let him run wild, and you can see what he did, scoring 3 touchdowns, including the game winner. But what I want to know, Ian, do you think there is now a quarterback controversy in Cleveland with Hoyer and Whedon? Do they go back to Whedon when he's healthy, or do they keep riding out Hoyer until he loses?
I think you have to ride the hot hand in the NFL. If Brian Hoyer is the hot hand, then you have to ride him. It's the way of the beast, and you never know what's going to happen in these situations. I mean, I like Brandon Whedon. I do. I like him as a guy. I like him as a quarterback. I just don't think in the system that the Browns are running, with the personnel that they have, he's the right fit. That's not to say that he's not an effective quarterback. Now, there is the age question. There's all these other things. But Hoyer is getting the start on Sunday. Not just because he carried the team to a win last week, but because they're still saying that Whedon's thumb isn't ready to go, and they're going to have him throwing the next week to see where they reevaluate him. I say if Brian Hoyer beats the Cincinnati Bengals on Sunday, he gets to start Thursday night. Regardless of what happens Thursday night, I say he gets to start the next game. If he loses 2 games in a row, and he really, really struggles in those 2 games, I mean, if he puts on a fantastic performance like he did against Minnesota, now obviously 3 interceptions, that's something that's going to have to come down, but if he puts on another good performance, if you can expect to get 200 to 250 yards passing out of him, a couple touchdowns passing out of him every game, I think you have to continue running with him, because it's just a thing where if the guy is playing at a high level, you have to keep playing him, because it's going to help your team down the road pick up victories. And victories, who knows, victories that could be very, very critical towards the end of the season.
Well, I mean, you got to remember, Brandon Whedon isn't the GM's guy. He's not. It's a new regime. It's a new GM. It's a new coach. He's not their guy. I mean, 30 years old. He had a year to prove what he was worth. I wasn't overly impressed with him. I mean, Brian Hoyer last week wasn't great, but I mean, he kept them in the game, and he made some good throws when he needed to.
He led a game-winning drive in a hostile environment. I mean,
yeah,
you can't really say, you don't really have to say much outside of that.
And what else was interesting is I want to see how the new rookie running back Giovanni Bernard fares against that Cleveland defense, because we saw what he could do against Pittsburgh and really open up their offense. I want to see as the season goes on, and especially in this matchup, how he fares, because the Browns' defense, their front sevens looked pretty good this year. So that'll be another key matchup in this game.
And when you hold the defending NFL MVP to 88 yards and the touchdown
It's
on the
not bad.
ground, it's not a bad
Not
day
at
at the
all.
office.
No.
All right, so what do you think will happen this week in Cleveland?
You know what? I think Cleveland's gonna come out and it's gonna be a close game, but I'm gonna call Bengals 24, Cleveland 21.
I mean, if the Bengals are going to be a team that's going to step up in this division, going to be the ones that take it, I mean, in a wide open AFC North with the Steelers 0-3, the Ravens 2-1 with a similar record to the Bengals. I mean, this is a game they have to win, but I don't think they're going to. I mean, I think Cleveland's going to be able to calm down their offense. I think they're going to keep them to a low-scoring game, and I think Cleveland pulls this out 21-17.
Cincinnati's coming off a very emotional win last week. A very, very emotional win. And a last-second turnover on a 4th and inches stop against Green Bay, and they recover a fumble and run it into the end zone for a game-winning score. That's the kind of win that sticks with the team for a while. Now, my question is going to be, can the Cincinnati Bengals turn the focus to the Browns? And I have my worries with this team. I love what the defense has brought to the Cleveland Browns. I love the Joe Hayden, A.J. Green matchup. I think that's consistently one of the best wide receiver cornerback matchups in the league. Every time they meet up, it's always fireworks. It's always something that you want to watch. I like the Cleveland Browns in this game. I really do. I think the Browns have something going with Brian Hoyer. I think you're going to continue to see the pass protection improve, especially along the right side of the line. And I think you're going to see that Josh Gordon is going to continue to have an excelling role in this offense. And I like the Browns to pull this one out. I'm going to give it a 28-17 win.
I guess I'm in the minority on this one. Let's go to some other key matchups in the NFL. one being the Chicago Bears versus the Detroit Lions. BJ, you got any opening thoughts on this one?
I mean, the Bears looking to go 4-0. I mean, they didn't look overly impressive on offense in Pittsburgh this past Sunday. I mean, defensively, they're phenomenal. 14 points, 4 turnovers. I mean, they look like the monsters of the Midway again. Going in against the Lions, high-scoring offense, I think it'll be up to the defense to neutralize them. Jay Cutler has really impressed me this season. I mean, with a better offensive line, he's looked like that quarterback everyone thought he was going to be going back to his Denver days, especially with Brandon Marshall with them. So I think the Bears are going to go in and take this one, go 4-0, and really take a hold upon that NFC North.
I think a big question is going to be, I don't know if Reggie Bush is playing this week. I haven't heard anything on that front. But if Reggie Bush plays, he adds a whole other dynamic option to that Detroit lineup. No team has really been able to figure out how they're going to stop him with the way that they've used him in the first couple of games. And I think if Reggie Bush plays, you can expect this game to be a lot closer and a lot higher scoring, which is what the Bears are not comfortable with. If he doesn't play, I say Chicago runs away with it. It's really, I think he adds that much of an element to that offense. And the Lions defense is still a bunch of question marks. You never know. Ndamukong Suh could go step on somebody's ankle at any minute. You never know he's a loose cannon at times. But they still have two of the most effective pass rushers in the game on that defensive line. I mean, it's really going to be an interesting matchup. I still like Chicago in it, but it may be a lot tighter than a lot of people think it's going to be.
Yeah, I think I like Chicago in this game, but you can't not be impressed with what Stafford's done this year. I mean, 2 years ago he really had a bust-out season, so everybody was expecting him last year to have the build on that, and he really didn't. He kind of took a step back and made people wonder about him. But I think the way he's playing this year, he's really gotten back to that level. Granted, he does need to cut down on some of his interceptions he's been throwing. But I mean, you look at him, he's been close to 300 yards, if not gone over 300 yards in all 3 games this year. But I think you're right. I think Chicago's defense, the way they create turnovers, and not just turning the ball over, turning those turnovers directly into points. Last week they scored 2 defensive touchdowns against Pittsburgh, and that's really what was the difference in the game. So I think Chicago's defense comes up with a couple key turnovers and they win the game.
Okay, let's go to another matchup of the 3-0 team. The Philadelphia Eagles under Chip Kelly going to take on the Broncos. I mean, are the Broncos going to lose in the regular season this year, Ian? I mean, it's gotten to that point with them.
Ask me that question in a few weeks, but they look absolutely unbelievable right now. They look virtually unstoppable at this point. Peyton Manning, a lot of people doubted him. There's no more doubts. This guy is the best quarterback in the National Football League, and there's no one even close to taking that title away from him. The guy is an absolute monster. He dissects defenses in a way that I don't think we have ever seen anybody do it. And I think no matter what the defense throws at him, he will always beat it. He's going to throw for 300 yards a game. He's going to throw for 4 touchdowns a game. Those are things that you can write down months in advance of a game and know it's going to happen. The guy is an absolute animal, and I don't think there's, even with the Philadelphia Eagles and their high-flying offense, and at times it's shown a lot of burst, even though it's kind of been slowed down the last couple of weeks. It can explode at any second. I think even if it does explode, the defense will not be able to get enough stops to keep Philadelphia in this game. Peyton Manning I think he's going to win the NFL MVP award. I think he's going to get this team to a Super Bowl, and I think he's going to get them to win a Super Bowl, really. I think they'll slip up once or twice in the regular season to answer your initial question. But name me a better team in football right now than the Denver Broncos. I dare you.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, Ian. BJ, I think you need to slow down a little with the undefeated talk. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Peyton Manning and the Broncos, but they played a questionable Ravens team, they played a Ravens team, a Raiders team, and then an absolutely horrible New York Giants team. So I think if they face a little better competition, you're right, they might slip up some. But I mean, that offense right now is just unbelievable. The way Peyton spreads the ball out to everybody, it's just unbelievable. And with the Eagles' high flying offense you talked about, Ian, I don't know if they want to keep giving the ball back to Peyton Manning as quick as they can. I think Chip Kelly needs to really rethink his strategy for this game because it's been proven in the past the way you beat Peyton Manning, you get pressure on him and you keep him off the field. If you're trying to score in 3 minutes or less, I mean, he might throw for 10 touchdowns this week.
Okay, let's move on to another matchup of 3-0 teams. The Falcons taking on the Patriots this week. Two 3-0 teams, both off to very impressive starts. The Patriots basically on the back of Tom Brady. I mean, they've looked rough the first couple of weeks with injuries to Danny Amendola and Rob Gronkowski. But I think once they come back, they'll go back to their Patriot form on offense. But I mean, so far this season, they've been able to win games without them. The Falcons, I mean, they're starting right back where they left off last year. High-flying offense with Matt Ryan dominating defense. I think it's going to be a great matchup. I like the Patriots in this one. What are your thoughts, Cody?
Yeah, I think the Patriots are going to win this week. And what's really going to be key is I believe Gronkowski will make his NFL debut or his season debut this week. According to the reports out there. So I really think Tom Brady's been missing that target. And I think you're going to see immediately within probably the first drive or two, you'll see Gronkowski catch a touchdown pass because that's just what he does. But more importantly with the Patriots offense, I've really been disappointed in Stephen Ridley this year. I mean, he had a bust-out year last year, and he's looked out of, I don't know if it's out of sync, out of funk, but maybe with the return of Gronkowski, he gets back to normal. Maybe he thought too much pressure on him. But I think the Patriots are going to win this one by at least 10 points. I don't really see it being that big of a contest.
I'll just say one thing. The Falcons did lose last week. Miami did beat them. I think they did.
Yeah, I thought that, Ian.
The Falcons are 3-0. Saw a commercial today for Monday Night Football. 2 3-0 teams.
I thought Miami beat them as well because Miami's 3-0. I believe the Falcons are 2-1. But we'll move on to college football. We'll get back to you guys on that one. Big matchup this week in the Big Ten as number 24 Wisconsin takes on number 4 Ohio State at the Horseshoe. And what's really interesting is this could be the week Braxton Miller returns. And they have him right now listed as co-starters with Kenny Guyton. What's your thought of playing Braxton and Kenny Guyton at the same time?
I mean, I know that the old adage is if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. But I mean, with this Ohio State team, you have 2 quarterbacks and you have 2 damn good quarterbacks. Braxton Miller, I mean, preseason was getting Heisman attention. So he goes out in the second game of the year. What does Kenny Guyton do? Comes in, throws 7 touchdowns. I know or 6 touchdowns. I know it's against Florida A&M, but I mean that's what you're supposed to do against teams like that. You're supposed to beat them 76-0. But he also looked good on the road at Cal, and he looked good in the game that he had to come in for Braxton Miller. So I think it'll be interesting with both of them being really good athletes. Urban Meyer said that he was going to run patches with both of them. I think it'll be really interesting to see utilizing the best 11 players on that team.
I think this is the time that Ohio State needs to finally really start to take advantage of its home field advantage. There are 105,000 seats in Ohio Stadium. It is a primetime game under the lights on national television against a team that calls themselves the Kings of the Big Ten. This is the time for Ohio Stadium to finally, what I think can be the loudest stadium in the country. Get that home field advantage. Take control of the game early. Dominate up front. Shut Wisconsin's offense down. Dominate this game. Put it over with because I think Wisconsin is one of the most overrated teams in the country, in my opinion.
Right. I don't see this game being very close. I mean, Ohio State's just on another level than Big Ten teams right now. I mean, you think of other top Big Ten teams, Michigan almost losing to Akron in the past couple of weeks. Wisconsin losing, a controversial loss. But, I mean, they're overrated nonetheless. I don't think this is going to be very close. I think the offense will put this away quickly. The defense has really stepped up this year with young players. But another player returning this week is Adolphus Washington. What do you think you're going to see from him, Cody?
Well, I think he had a great year last year. He came in. He didn't play all the time last year, but when he was in, he was making plays. This year, he's got that starting job. They're going to give him the nod. I really expect him to have a good game. And I know last week we only played Florida A&M and we shut them out. But I want to see the defense build on that. I mean, that's the kind of game that you get your confidence going, and hopefully that translates into the big start of Big Ten play. And I just want to let everybody know, if you are going to the Ohio State game this weekend, they are calling for what they're calling a scarlet out. They want everybody in the stadium to wear something scarlet. So if you're going to the game, don't wear that white away jersey or a black Ohio State. Wear the scarlet.
Okay, let's move on to another matchup in the college football this week. We're going to have WVU against number 11 Oklahoma State. I mean, nothing positive for the Mountaineers so far this year. Needed a last quarter drive to beat William & Mary in the opener. Last week lost 37-0 to Maryland. I mean, so far in his career, the hallmark of Dana Holgorsen teams has been putting up points. But, I mean, they haven't even been able to do that this year. It's been pretty pathetic. You think anything's going to change this week against a good Oklahoma State team?
No. I mean, if they lost 37-0 to a decent Maryland team, I mean, I think West Virginia might be on the other end of those 65-0 victories they're used to against the Division I A teams. What this brings up a good point though, Ian. Do you think Holgorsen's on the hot seat?
No. Dana Holgorsen is not on the hot seat. He's halfway out the door.
Oh, okay.
This is a mess in Morgantown right now. This is an absolute disaster. Ever since this team has made the jump to a Big 12 conference, which I think anyone with half a brain knew was going to be a absolute disaster to begin with. But there is so much wrong with this team that if I were to try and start explaining it, it'd take another hour out of this podcast. So,
and we just don't have time.
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay, let's move on. Let's take a look at the OU Bobcat season so far. Sitting at 2-1.
2-1.
Sitting at 2-1, going into a bye week. What have you seen so far from the first 3 weeks that impressed you by the Bobcats?
Resiliency, really. I mean, they went on the road, season opener on national television against Louisville, and got thoroughly embarrassed on national television. Come back the next week, you have a very winnable game against, I believe it was North Texas that they played. Very winnable game. They went out and they handled their business in that one. Then they come out the next week in a regional rivalry game against Marshall and pull out a big win, beating Marshall for the third straight year. That hasn't happened since the 70s. So this team has a lot of resiliency, a lot of fight, and they're going to be a serious contender in this conference for the rest of the year. I mean, there's really not much outside of them, with the exception of maybe Bowling Green in Northern Illinois, that are going to threaten them, from winning a conference title, I think. I think it's a really good team, a really consistent team, and a team that relies heavily on its defense a lot more than its offense, I think, which is a good hallmark of a team when you can put that much faith in your defense that you don't have to expect your offense to go out and score every time down the field.
Right. I don't think you can take too much away from the first week loss to Louisville. I mean, Louisville considers themselves national title contenders, being in the New America East. I'm not sure if that's fair, but I mean, they have one of the best quarterbacks in the nation with Teddy Bridgewater and a really good team around him. So I don't think you can take too much from that first week loss. But, I mean, the next couple games, they come back, they win. Going into MAC play, they get Akron in the opener. And I think, like you said, I mean, there's not going to be too many people that are going to threaten them in the MAC. And it'd be nice to see them get to a good bowl game this year.
Yeah, but, I mean, I don't know if that game against Michigan was a fluke with Akron. Do you think Akron poses a threat to OU next week?
No, I don't see Akron posing any kind of threat to OU at all. I think... And Akron is a team that I think it's a program that you're going to see start to go on the rise a little bit in the next couple of years when Terry Bowden starts to get the kind of guys that he wants in that program, in that system. But for the time being, the only team in OU's own division that will threaten them from whitewashing their way through this division is Bowling Green. Because Bowling Green, I think, outside of maybe Northern Illinois, is the best team in this conference right now. But it's going to be... There's a lot of football left to be played. You don't know.
Right.
Some things are going to happen. We saw what happened to OU last year. Get a national ranking. Injuries catch up to you. you lose to your arch rival the very next week, and you basically just crumble apart down the rest of the year. So staying healthy, playing consistently, and kind of just handling your business. That's gonna be the hallmarks of this team, and that's what they're gonna have to do if they want to get to that top level and really get to Detroit and start playing for MAC titles.
Yeah, and I've been impressed with the quarterback play this year, haven't you, Ian?
Yeah, I mean Tyler Tettleton is
son of Mickey Tettleton.
I knew you were gonna say that. I think he's one of the most underrated quarterbacks in college football. I mean, playing in a MAC school, he's really not going to get as much attention as you are going to get some of the other guys. But I mean, he really had a breakout season a couple of years ago. I mean, he's a 3-year starter at the college level. That speaks volumes enough that they put enough faith in him as a young quarterback to really start going at it. He's proven to be consistent again without a real reliable running game this year. He's really kind of had to take a lot of the onus on himself to engineer that offense, and he's really stepped up to the plate and done really well with it.
Do you think that he could be like a next Ben Roethlisberger type at the next level? I mean, not really getting a lot of national attention, but doing what he needs to in the MAC. And then, do you think his game translates to the next level?
I think he's a little undersized to really do a lot at the next level.
That's what they said about Drew Brees.
They did say that about Drew Brees, but I mean,
Drew Brees is Drew Brees.
Drew Brees is Drew Brees. There is that. But Tyler's a great quarterback. I think you're gonna hear a lot of him down the road. I don't think he'll be a draft pick. I don't think he's got quite the development down under him yet to really say he's going to be a draft pick. But I think you could see him maybe pop up on an NFL roster later on down the road as an undrafted free agent. I think he's got a lot of potential in this game, and I think he's got a lot of still left to learn. He's excited about learning it, I think.
Yeah, and that's what's key to the NFL is potential. I mean, they draft people on potential all the time. So we'll see how that pans out. Other key matchups this week, Notre Dame versus Oklahoma. And really, if you guys ask me, this is one game I just have no interest in. You have two overrated teams here playing.
Absolutely.
I probably won't even watch the game. Ian, any thoughts?
I'm going to watch the game just for the fact of the tradition of the two schools, really. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I'm going to base it a lot on reputation rather than on-field performance, I think. But I think Oklahoma's going to give you what they give you. Bob Stoops is going to do what he does. Notre Dame, I don't know what Notre Dame's going to show up. Is it going to be the Notre Dame that is going to be competitive and run through a lot of teams, or is it going to be the Notre Dame that struggles against Purdue and Michigan and teams like that and aren't able to close out big games? Now they are playing in South Bend this week. I don't know how much of a difference that'll make, but also the psychological edge. Notre Dame was able to go into Norman last year, knock off the Sooners en route to go into the BCS national title game, where they were thoroughly embarrassed by a team that was far superior than them in every aspect of the game. But I think I'm going to watch this game. I think it's going to be an entertaining game. I think it's going to be a close game. It may not be the best game of the week, but I think it's going to be a pretty good football game.
I don't think it has really as many national implications as you would think a ranked matchup does. Notre Dame, I mean, with one loss, it would take a lot of teams following the two losses for them to really make it to the BCS National Championship game. Oklahoma, in the past couple years, has the hallmark of not showing up in big games. I don't really know. I don't think that Notre Dame will show up with their really bad offense. I mean, Tommy Rees is just not very good. I think Oklahoma will take this game in South Bend, but I don't think it really has that many implications on a national stage. Let's move on to another ranked game this week. Ole Miss is going to take on Alabama. What do you think?
I'm glad you didn't ask me the question that I thought you were going to ask me, because I was going to just get up and walk out, because it's ridiculous to even assume that Alabama loses this game under any circumstances. Alabama is far and away the best college football team we've seen in the last 25 years. There's nobody at this point in time that I think is even going to be remotely close to beating them. They are thoroughly dominant in everything that they do. Every game is just as important as the last one, and every game is just as important as the next one. Nick Saban is an absolute genius as a head coach. He's got this program firing on every single cylinder, and I truly don't think that despite all the progress that Ole Miss has made throughout the offseason, throughout the camp, and so far this season, they've picked up a couple of big wins. It's not even going to be close. Alabama's going to run away with this. Hide your children. Don't watch this. It's going to get ugly. I'm telling you.
I got the complete opposite view on this game, Ian. Now, I'm not going to go out and say Ole Miss is going to beat Alabama. But when you talk about teams that are absolutely dominant, they have no business losing to this team, that's when teams like that lose. Now, you see it time and time again.
Now, I'll just say this. The teams that Alabama has lost to in the last couple of years are top 10 teams.
I'm not disagreeing with that fact, Ian. But all I'm saying is, I mean, when you go to the Virginia Tech opener with Alabama, yeah, they beat them. I mean, I wasn't that impressed. I thought they were going to absolutely steamroll Virginia Tech, and they let them hang around for a quarter or two. I mean, and they just came off a really good victory against Texas A&M in a shootout. But I do think this game is going to be a little closer than what you're saying and what other people are saying. And it may not be this year that Ole Miss beats Alabama, but they better watch out because Ole Miss is getting better very quickly. So
I think the most interesting thing with Alabama is the improvement of A.J. McCarron. I mean, you think of him a couple of years ago, you think of him as a turnaround, hand it to Eddie Lacy, turn it to Mark Dinger, turn to whoever's in the backfield, and they're going to run for 200 yards. He's really developed as a quarterback, especially in the Texas A&M game. I mean, they had to score 40-plus points to beat Texas A&M, and he went out there and he did it. This week, Ole Miss is good, but they're not on Alabama's level. I don't think it'll be as ugly, but as Ian is saying, or I don't think it's going to be as close as Cody's saying, but I think it'll be about a 20-point game.
That's a blowout.
That is a blowout.
That is a blowout.
And before we move on to baseball, me being in my sleep-deprived state, no, the Falcons are not undefeated. They have 2 losses.
So what he's saying is Ian and I were right.
We were
because
right all
Miami
along.
I don't know what I saw, commercial I think I saw. All I know is I didn't sleep a lot last night, and that's going to be my excuse for not having that really, really common knowledge that the Falcons have lost 2 games and are not 3-0.
They lost the season opener to New Orleans. I mean,
yeah, I mean you don't go undefeated losing the season opener.
So let's we'll move on from that. You know, maybe next week's podcast BJ will do his research like the rest of us. But let's talk about some baseball. We have what some consider to be an important matchup this weekend. I don't so much see it. It's the Reds and Pirates. What they're pretty much playing for, they're playing for the home field advantage for the 1-game wild card. BJ, why don't you open up? Any thoughts on this series? Is it important? Is it just another series?
It's important because, I mean, at this point, as very, very, very unlikely as it is, the Cardinals have not clinched the division yet. I mean, they would have to lose 3 to the Cubs this weekend, which is probably not going to happen. The Pirates would have to sweep the Reds. But, I mean, you're at least still playing for the division if you're the Pirates, at least a division tie. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's an important series. I mean, you don't want to lose 3 straight times to a team that you're going to have to beat. But at the same point, you don't want to win 3 straight games because you know a good Reds team is going to beat you the 4th time. I'd like to see Pittsburgh take 2 or 3. The city of Pittsburgh deserves to host at least 1 playoff game this year. But I'm with you. It's not as important as people are thinking. I just want to see Francisco Liriano get his rest this week, come out and dominate like I know he can in Tuesday's wild card game.
I think it's a lot more important than you two are putting on it, just not because of who hosts the wild card game, but I think psychologically for this team, it's a big, big game. They lost 2 out of 3 games to this same Cincinnati team a week ago. On their home field, with a chance to really put some distance in between the 2 teams for a potential wild card spot. That's going to weigh on this team a little bit. That's going to eat at them a little bit. And I want to see how well they respond to that. I want to see whether or not they can come out and really take it to Cincinnati. I would love to see this team sweep the Reds. I really would, because I think despite the veteran leadership of the Cincinnati Reds, if the Pittsburgh Pirates go into their stadium, beat them in the final 3 games of the season, then they have to go to Pittsburgh and play that same team, I don't think that the Reds can answer that.
Right, and I think a key this weekend. It's not been officially announced that I know of yet as the Pirates, but they're most likely going to skip Jeff Locke with tomorrow's off day.
Please skip Jeff
Please,
Locke.
for the sake of everyone in the baseball community, skip Jeff Locke. I mean, and then thinking about that, I mean, you have 3 of your best pitchers going this weekend. You have A.J. Burnett, you got Charlie Morton, you got Garrett Cole. I mean, those are 3 really good pitchers. But it really comes down to the offense for this team. The pitching most days is going to be there. I mean, Francisco Liriano had an off day today and only gave up 4 runs. That was really one of his bad starts. I don't know if the offense will show up. I mean, they didn't last weekend. What do you think, Cody?
Well, and you got to look. Yeah, this Pittsburgh Pirate team took 2 or 3 against a bad Chicago team. But with the exception of that middle game, they only scored 4 runs against a bad Cubs team. So, I mean, it took a Starling Marte 9th inning home run to win it the first night. And we didn't even put up enough runs today to win. So that's a huge key. And as we found out last week in last week's series, no lead is safe against that Cincinnati offense. I mean, you're going in that first game of the series, you're up 5-2 9th inning. And then they score 3, and then the eventual game-winning run.
But do you feel better with Jason Grilli in the closing role opposed to Mark Melancon?
Yes, but I mean, there's still the fact. Yes, I thought, and I said all along that once Grilli was healthy, he should be put back into that closer spot, no matter how well Melancon was doing, because you traded away a really good closer to make Grilli the closer. Now you have to stick with him. And people forget he was an all-star closer. He had 31 saves before he was injured. So, I mean, had he not got injured, he might be sitting around 50 saves right now, which is really impressive for a season. But the bigger concern in that is, yes, you have Grilli back for the 9th, but Melancon the last 3 games has looked really bad, and he's your 8th inning man. And your 8th inning guy is just as important as that closer.
I'd like to see, if Mark Melancon continues to struggle this weekend, I'd like to see them maybe in the wild card game, if it comes down to it, giving the 8th inning role to Justin Wilson. I mean, he's been absolutely lights out this year. He had a rough stretch. They gave him a week off. His velocity went down. They gave him a week off. His velocity's right back up. Left-handed flamethrower. Could be a future closer, and I'd like to see him get that 8th inning role if Melancon continues to struggle.
Yeah, that or Tony Watson, because he's been playing really well since the All-Star break. So, yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting series.
Just not Brian Morris.
You know what they should bring back, and this is serious, Zagorski. How well was he the 5 or 6 games he lasted? Okay, that was a joke, everybody. I mean, half of you watching this might have to go Google who he is. Just don't even waste your time.
Make sure you have a really, really big computer screen. He will take up all of it.
Okay, let's move on from the Pirates and Reds, and let's shift the focus to the Indians and Twins. Indians, they're sitting pretty well for that wild card spot. They're still in second place?
Still in second place.
So they're looking pretty well. I mean, if they could take care of business against a bad Minnesota Twins team, you could see the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Cleveland Indians in the postseason. And for people around here, that would be huge.
That would be.
Just a quick update on that game. It just went final. The Indians did beat a bad White Sox team 7-2. But the Rangers appear well on their way to beating an Astros team to put the magic number at 4 instead of 5.
Magic number is still at 4. So basically, all we're saying is Cleveland's got to win the next 4 games against Minnesota, and they're in the playoffs. It's that easy. Cleveland, man, you can't say enough about the job that Terry Francona has done with that team this year. You cannot say enough about that job. I don't know if they're going to have the fire to catch Tampa Bay right now and get that home wild card game. I think Tampa Bay, they just swept New York today. They're going on the road to play Toronto.
Yeah.
I don't think Toronto's going to beat Tampa Bay at all, but it's going to be about consistency from this point out. The Indians scored 7 runs tonight. That's huge. Are they going to be able to put up 4, 5, 6 runs a game from the next 4 games? Because I feel like 4, 5, 6 runs a game are going to win them ball games. They can't go out and put up a dud and put out 1 or 2 runs a game. That will not do it. They've got to put up 4, 5, 6, 7 runs a game. If they handle their business, don't even worry about what Texas is doing. Don't even worry about what Tampa Bay is doing. Go out there, play 9 innings of baseball, win baseball games, and go play in the playoffs. It's that easy.
Yeah, and I don't really know how much of an advantage they would get playing that wild card game in Cleveland, because if you look at it, there's not a whole lot. Even though the Indians have playing very well this year, there's still not a lot of people at the Indians games, you know. So I don't think them playing at the actual the Indian Stadium, Progressive Field. Thank you. I don't think that's really going to matter to them, because either way, whether they play there or they go to Tampa Bay, there's probably going to be more sports reporters covering the game than there would be fans for either stadium.
Right. I think that's a really interesting point. I mean, the people of Cleveland cry and cry and cry for a winner, and they have a winning baseball team, and they're putting out 10,000 a night at the Jake, and that's not acceptable. You have to go out there and support a team in a pennant race.
Yeah, they're lucky A.J. Burnett doesn't pitch for the Indians, because he would be calling them out every single night.
I mean, I think they put 21,000 people in that stadium last night, which is one of their biggest draws of the year thus far. They put 21,000. I don't know what the attendance numbers are tonight. It was the last home game of the regular season for them. I could expect there was going to be another good crowd tonight, but listen, Cleveland will respond. The city is going to respond when this team gets in the playoffs. And I'm going to tell you right now, the Cleveland Indians are going to get in the playoffs. Right now, flat out, hands down. They will be in the playoffs.
Right. I mean, they get a bad Minnesota Twins team, and the Rangers have to go play they're not a very good but a talented Angels team. I mean, it's not like you would want to play them. And with the rivalry that's existed between the Angels and Rangers competing for AL West crowns, I mean, nothing more would put a cap on a bad season for the Angels than to knock the Rangers out of the playoffs and know they're both going to be sitting at home in October watching the playoffs.
I think it's very feasible that Cleveland takes at least 3 of the 4 games in Minnesota, and I think it's very feasible that LA takes 2 games from Texas, which is all that you need. Just as long as you win 1 more game than the other guys, you're in the playoffs. That's all that counts.
Yeah, and what's a big thing here? I mean, I know, and Ian, you being an Indians fan, it had to have been awesome to see Jason Giambi hit that walk-off home run the other night. But the bigger question that people didn't talk about because he hit that home run is the inconsistency of Chris Perez this year. Ian, can you honestly say, in a playoff game with the Tampa Bay Rays, Cleveland Indians up 3-2 going into the 9th inning, can you trust Perez to close it out to get to the divisional round?
No.
So who do you go with?
Anybody but him. I would honestly rather Terry Francona pick a random fan out of the stands and have him go out there and throw the bottom of the 9th inning than I would Chris Perez. I really do. I don't have any faith in what Chris Perez does, and I don't like Chris Perez as a person anyways. I mean, when you blow
order
a save,
marijuana to your house.
when not even that, but I mean not even just that, but when you blow a save, you go back to the dugout and you don't even do your team the justice of staying in the dugout to watch them go to bat in the bottom of the 9th. You walk back into the clubhouse and you sit there and you pout. You don't talk to the media about it. You put on a media blackout and you don't want to talk to anybody about it. And you want to just be a little crybaby the whole time. That's why there is nobody in the city of Cleveland that likes this guy.
So are there other options available for Terry Francona and the Indians, or are they pretty much stuck with him for the rest of this year?
I would like to see them, if they get to the 1-game playoff, I'm not sure how the rotation's lining up. I'd like to see them start Masterson, and then maybe go with a guy like Ubaldo Jimenez in the 9th. I mean, he throws fast enough. He has the pitches. I know like for his psyche, he wouldn't want to be in the bullpen. But I mean, just in the one wild card game, it'd be nice to have him out there as a weapon in the bullpen.
On that front, the Indians announced today they are moving Masterson to the bullpen for the rest of the season. He's going to be in the bullpen. He's coming off that injury. He's coming off that arm injury. He hasn't really been able to throw in the month of September, late
That'll
August,
be
early
huge, I
September.
think,
So
for them.
they're going to have Masterson going in the bullpen. Why not
So
throw
maybe
Masterson?
maybe reverse.
Why not?
Start Jimenez and have
I
Masterson.
would. I think right now when the Indians are playing in that one game playoff, and I said when,
Not if, when.
When from Ian McConville right here.
when the Indians are playing in that one game playoff, start Ubaldo Jimenez. The guy's the hottest arm in that rotation right now. 4-0 in the month of September. An ERA below 2. I mean, he's been absolutely on fire. He's the most consistent, reliable arm in that rotation right now, and you have to ride that. In a critical game like that, you have to go with it.
So I guess Ian pretty much just said it. BJ, is there any way you think the Rangers, salvage the season and get into that playoff, or do you think Cleveland just it's theirs because pretty much default because of the free fall of the Rangers?
I don't think the Rangers can get in. I mean, what a terrible September for the Rangers the past couple months. I mean, last year they should have pretty much wrapped up the division. They lose. They end up losing the division to the A's and lose the wild card game. It was a really pathetic performance. And I mean, this year they're doing the same exact thing. I mean, they've lost, and this time they might not even make the playoffs, and I don't expect them to. I don't think that they're a very good baseball club, or have been this past month. I mean, obviously they're a good club, but they haven't been playing like it, and they haven't had any pitching, they haven't had any offense. I don't expect that to change this weekend, do you?
So what you're saying, though, is the Rangers are really missing Nelson Cruz.
A little bit. I think that if you're going to point to one thing with the Rangers, which obviously there's more than one thing that's causing them to lose right now, but Nelson Cruz is a big part of that, and I think his absence is what is going to ultimately keep Texas out of the playoffs.
Okay, I agree with you. On this closing note here, let's just do one last thing. Out of all of the sporting events this weekend, Ian, tell me the one event that you're most interested in seeing or watching.
The one event that I'm most interested in watching. Wow, you're trying to put me on the bubble here. I'm gonna say I want to see whether or not the Browns are gonna be able to keep the level of consistency. I'm gonna say whether or not they can keep that consistent play and ride the momentum from last week and pick up a big win over an in-state rival. That's what I'm most interested in seeing.
BJ?
Is there any preseason hockey or preseason NBA going to start up this weekend? Oh, okay. Now, I think probably the biggest thing I'm interested in seeing is Ohio State versus Wisconsin. Wisconsin is going to be one of their toughest competitors in the Big Ten, and I don't even expect the game to be close. I mean, if that's not a close game, then I expect the Buckeyes. I mean, they have to be on their A game because the Big Ten it's solid, but I'd like to see them really kind of just crush Wisconsin on their way to proving that on the national stage that they deserve to be in the national championship game.
Yeah, and one quick note before I tell you what mine is. I was on ESPN the other day. They had
evil four-letter.
Yeah, and they had the article about Miller returning, and I know it's just some random person, but he left this comment saying Ohio State shouldn't even be in the top 10, that had they been an SEC team, they would be the 9th best SEC team in the league.
That's a stretch. That is
9th best.
That is a stretch.
I mean, I know it was just probably some random dumb person, but I mean, that's the kind of respect the SEC gets nowadays. It just it was kind of humorous because you're right. I really do think Ohio State is a national contender this year. Whether they go to the BCS National Championship game, we have to see. But I think the thing I'm looking forward to this most weekend is I want to see a college football upset. I mean, we really haven't seen one this year, and it's going on week 4. I mean, I thought I was going to get that big upset with Akron over Michigan. You know, Michigan somehow pulls it out.
Even Michigan last week against UConn.
Right. I mean, and
No,
I know it wouldn't have been an upset if A&M would have beat Alabama, but just something. So
a marginal upset.
Well, not compared to some people. Some people are ready to give A&M the title and Johnny Football on another Heisman Trophy. But we'll say that for another talk. But yeah, I just want to see an upset.
I'd like to see good matchups in college. Last week was pathetic, absolutely pathetic, and you got to put it on the athletic directors. I mean, Ohio State, sure, there's the excuse of, well, Vanderbilt canceled at the last minute, Florida A&M was all we could find. But I mean, other teams too, like Louisville beat a team 70-0. It's unexcusable. And if I'm a college football fan and I'm paying money for these tickets, I would be outraged. I mean, you want to see good competition, the best teams playing the best teams. And that's why so many people like the SEC. It pits the best teams against the best teams.
Yeah, and you will see Ohio State and the rest of the Big Ten moving forward, no longer playing the so-called cupcakes anymore. They've discouraged that. They've discouraged the schools from scheduling those type of teams. BJ, you just got to keep in mind that the schedule was out years in advance, so that's just how it was a couple years ago. But you're right. I mean, I wouldn't want to pay money. Actually, you know what? If you want to look at it the other way, that's a game like that again, Ohio State versus Florida A&M. I mean, that's one of the only games you can really get tickets to. I mean, I know I do too, BJ. I would love to see Ohio State bring back like USC a couple years ago, how that was a great matchup. But think about the ticket prices for that, BJ.
Right. I mean, but it was nice to see them play USC, play Texas.
And they were challenged early.
Sure, they lost, but I mean, it was good for them to play some really top competition early. Any last things you'd like to add, Ian?
Roll Tribe. Outside of that, there's really not much I can say.
Any last comments, Cody?
No, I'm just hoping this weekend for a couple Pirate victories so we can get that home game at PNC Park. And that's about it. Maybe hoping the Steelers win this week.
No.
Let's. Not a lot I can add. Good Pirates, good Tribe.
Abso-bucking-lutely.
Abso-bucking-lutely.
Welcome to Bucktober, everybody.
All right, we'll see you next week.